everybody to Ex Animo Workshop Skin Contact. This is the second workshop we've done in our new spot in Woodstock in Cape Town. So we're very excited about holding today. This is something I wanted to do for a long, long time, really dig down into skin contact or skin macerated white wines. We have two of the premium, we're supposed to have three actually. We've only managed to get two of you, the premier skin contact winemakers of South Africa. We've got Jürgen Kroes here from Interlego Wines, and we've got Craig Hawkins from Testalonga, both based in the Swartland. I first came across their wines, and them, I suppose, more so than their wines, when I was still living in Australia. I visited Cape Wine in 2012, about 3 months prior to my move to South Africa, and visited the Swartland stand, and came across both your wines. I think you were both still at Lammersook at that stage, where you also made some skin contact wines. These two guys, and there's our third compatriot who couldn't make it this evening, is Johan Meyer of Mother Rock and J.H. Meyer Wines. So in my opinion, they're the three premier skin contact producers in the country. Since Ex Animo started in 2014, we've had skin contact wines on our price list, which was a difficult explanation back in 2014 to explain to people that orange wine was not actually made out of oranges. So it's something that we've been working with intimately for our entire existence, or about 9.5 years now. And it's a style of wine that I'm deeply in love with. I don't love every single skin contact wine I have, but I think it's just such a wonderful addition to the world of wine. In between, white and red, essentially, and it just expresses varieties and terroirs very, very differently than more traditionally, pressed white wine does. So I'm keen to learn as much as possible from the two gentlemen on my left. We have some wines in our glasses already. The first wine is the Testalonga El Bendito Skin Contact 2017, so out of Magnum, so that's out of Craig's cellar, which is, thank you for bringing that. The second wine is the current release of Jürgen's Alimentus, which is 2022, and the third wine is out of Jürgen's cellar, the 2016 Alimentus. So it's going to be interesting to examine those wines. Thank you for bringing those, gents, I really appreciate it. We're going to have another little bracket after this as well. But what I thought I'd start with is, what is skin contact wine? Is there a definition in the South African laws for skin macerated wine? There wasn't when we first started, when Ex Animo first started, but I believe that's changed.
Right, yeah, thanks for having us here. Thanks for coming. And to all the millions of viewers out there, thanks for liking and subscribing. Now, I've been listening to a rugby podcast on the way in, and that's all they've been talking about.
We're not sponsored by Harry Norman.
Yeah, no. We're sponsored by Frankie Fenner.
Exactly. Well, sponsored by
yeah, excuse my voice. I am a little bit under the weather. I've got two young children, and they play in the sand pits a lot.
I thought they might be screaming at the rugby.
And that too. And they bring back a lot of diseases. But I'm healthy and safe. But my voice and taste is a little bit jaded, so it's good that we're drinking orange wine, because I think it cuts through that and the biltong. But we started, when I talk about we, it's nice because Jürgen we've come a long way together as well. From the beginning, I started in 2008, and with this, my first wine was this wine you're tasting tonight, the El Bendito, the skin contact. And there were no skin contact categories back then. The idea wasn't to make a skin contact to make a category. But to answer your question, after 4 years of not getting the wines past the board and all of that, and struggling, and it just became a bit tedious. But
so just for those who don't know, you have to get the wine certified in order to export it and to have a vintage on it and a region on it.
Yeah, that's right. So South Africa is a bit it's like that. So uncertified or certified, you need to have that that seal. So anyway, but we did, when I say we, Jürgen and I, were the driving guys behind starting that category, which is called skin macerated white wines. and the wines have to be fermented for at least 4 days on the skins.
So it can't be a cold second, it has to be fermented, or is it just...
So press, no, look, we've created the category to get the wines passed. But so if you want to do that, that's fine. I don't actually really care. But it's not about the category, but the category has become something now, which is nice. It's something skin macerated white wine, which is what it is. And these wines represent something from South Africa. I think we're one of the few countries that have made a category. So that is quite cool in that regard. But the skin contact for 48 hours, and then there's obviously the sulfur additions have to...
Just 2 days?
Sorry, what's 4 days? 4 times
96
hours. There you go. Yeah. So that's if you want to have the skin macerated on the thing. So because we found that was a good... it's always difficult to draw a line in the sand.
Yes.
There will always be people that say, oh, but mine is not that, and it's still this, but...
Yeah, spent 2 hours in the press.
Yeah, exactly. But that I think we'll touch on later with the other wines, and I think that also has its role. So, not to go straight into the nitty-gritty of it, but the category has helped identify, I think, and particularly with looking now back, the younger guys coming through and girls that want to make orange wine, they're not afraid to do it. They have somewhere where it can be represented.
Yes, there is a line in the sand, and it's not a colour situation. There's no colour chart, or it's just a requirement of production.
Yeah, that was 2012, and we basically based it on our wines because that's what they asked us to do. And then 2015 it got passed, and then it was basically clean sailing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, and so here, skin contact, orange, amber, are all these things interchangeable, or do you think they're interchangeable, Jochen, or are they? I mean, some people think that, if you finish fermentation on skins, then you need to have a post-ferment maceration for it to be truly, orange, or are you?
It depends from wine to wine, I think. Okay. And I mean, it's even I learn as we go along, and as my wines age through the vintages, and like you can see now the 2016, which is the last glass on your right-hand side, it's a lot more intense color, more amber color, and if you go back to the 2022, for instance, it's a lot more yellowish. I think it also happens over time, but also a lot has to do with the whole process. Do you work very oxidative with the wines? Do you work more in a reductive way? So, I think it's very interesting, and it throws open the whole category. Because at the end of the day, also it brings in the way of the wine's been made by the winemaker, and also I think it also says a lot about the personality of the winemaker, and you can kind of like play a bit around with it. So it's very difficult to pinpoint. I think it's the amber, like you asked before as well, with the color. There's no color chart. It doesn't have to be a certain color, but obviously a certain amount of time on the skins, and then it depends on the varietal. I work with a varietal called Viognier. That's way more intense, way more amber color than, for instance, Chenin Blanc. So I think that's also the very cool thing, and maybe also in general, I think with skin contact wines, it's not just like one specific thing, and I mean you can play a lot around with it, and I think it's just it opens up the whole category. So I think that. Otherwise it would have been very simple, very direct, one-dimensional, but now, we can be very,
Maybe, Craig, just introduce us to the first one, and then I'll get you to talk to us about 1, 2, and 3, and then we can continue the discussion.
Yeah, so I mean, that label on the right, it's Al Bandito, that we started that, when I say we, it's my wife, Carla, and I. We were together then, but we weren't married. We got married in 2015, but this wine was started in 2008. It was the first wine I ever made. I fell in love with orange wines or skin macerated white wines in 2007, working in the Southern Rhone at a producer called Roc d'Anglade, Remy Pedrino. And I was sleeping in the bottom of his garden, because the French don't like you to sleep in their house during harvest. So they give you a tent on a hill. So you wake up at the bottom. If he's watching, thanks for the bed. But he gave me this bottle of wine. It was a skin macerated white wine from Italy, from Dolce Acqua, from Mr. Antonio Perino. It was a skin fermented Vermentino, and his nickname is Testalonga, and that's where the name came from. I had my epiphany moment. Back then we didn't have cell phones, but we had those, or we did, but it didn't have photos on there. But I took must have been one of the world's first selfies, but with a camera, normal camera, and the bottle, and I was like, this is what I want to do. I knew I'm going to come back to South Africa and make orange wines. So Testalonga is a bandit from Sicily as well, so I called the wine Al Bandito. And obviously with his permission, I used Testalonga as well. And I worked with a little block of Chenin at the top of Lammerhoek Farm. Not where this block comes from, actually. That was my first vintage, was from that farm, which was very cool. I pruned it and did all the work myself. I had lots of time on my hands.
So before making this first wine, did you sort of ask questions? Did you?
Yes.
I mean, obviously, who did you?
Yeah, so the reason I was drawn to it is because I'm not from a winemaking family and I wanted to get into, I just love points of difference, but that points of difference that have a value as well. And I love wine, all wine, and I drink a lot of wine, different wines, but skin macerated white wine hit the chord with me because there was the texture that you don't get on a normal white wine and you don't get with a red or a rosé. And I came back to South Africa and I looked around and you couldn't find them. But that just meant that we had to try and make something, which we did. And it was wonderful. It had tannin, it had color, it was more towards that color. It was spent longer on the skins, 4 weeks, but then over time I honed the style. It became a style for me because it was also about drinkability, and I wanted the wine to have not just tannin and color and all of that, but I wanted it to be also balanced, like a normal wine. So 2017, I think is I think I wanted to show this wine because I think 17 is a very good vintage for us. It's very clean, it's precise. This wine is unfiltered, unfined, and there's just a bit of sulfur added. And it's held up quite beautifully, even though it's in natural cork, so there's a bit of a lottery back then with the corks we get, but I think it's showing quite nicely. Where we've moved now, if you pour our kind of younger orange wines, some people look at them and it doesn't even, the color is not really golden or as orange, and that for me it's never been about the color, it's been about adding texture to the wine. Okay. And I think that's this wine shows that quite well.
With texture, that was obviously affect the flavor of the wine as well, the characteristics, or not as much as more about texture?
Yeah, for sure, the two go hand in hand. I think everything is there together. But also, we don't only make wines. I think our white wines can age quite a long time, and I think this shows that. And even though it's only 7 years old, but it can go another 7 years easily.
And do you think the skin contact
definitely
adds to that?
The skin contact. I mean, for those that don't know, there's this. It's tannin, anthocyanin. So it's a type of preservative that will help hold the wine together as well. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a combination of these soils in the Paardeberg. They tend to give you quite low pH as well, and it depends on the vintage. Mm-hmm. And they give you everything that you need to make a solid wine that can stand up 7 years later at least.
Okay. And do you remember how long this was on skins for? 17?
It should say on the back of the bottle. It says 10 days. Skin maceration. Yeah.
And we believe that, do we?
Always.
Yeah. Yeah. And has that changed over time?
It has. I think we kind of.
Or do you
first 2 years I did 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And then I did 3 weeks, and then first vintage 4 weeks, 3 weeks, and then I did 2 years in 2010, which was crazy. It's amazing, the tannin there, but the volatile is still legal, but it's a bit uplifted. But there's nothing worse than being just legal. I'm watching Better Call Saul now as well. There's nothing worse than just being legal. But so that's kind of where we so 2013 I realized, okay, where do we go that's going to make something that we all happy with? In terms of we all means me and Carla, and that it's about that balance between the two. But I am going to explore the 2 year again because I think I've improved since then and can make it better.
Okay. Cool. Thank you very much. And Jürgen, talk to us about Alimentus and how that came about. Was that your first skin contact wine that you created?
Actually, part of my inspiration is sitting next to me. No, on my left-hand side. No, I worked at Lammerhoek with Craig, and he was making the first few vintages of his Al Bandito, and then we spoke about it. And at that stage, there were not a lot of these skin contact wines in South Africa, and we thought it was a good idea. I also wanted to explore because I found it very fascinating tasting his wines. I remembered back then as well. I didn't see him for like a year or so, and we met up at little pizza place in Riebeek the one night, and he brought over some Shannons, and I was quite surprised by how he made these wines, and actually the wines tasted almost like out of place in a good sense, in the sense that it didn't taste South African. And I think that kind of like also inspired me, and to see that also you can make this style of wines, and not only just skin contact wines, but wines in general in a lower alcohol version, a lot fresher, you know, showing more acidity and stuff. And then we spoke about the skin contact thing, and I was like, yeah, I want to explore this. I want to try this, you know, see where this is going. It was like fascinating me, the flavors and everything. And I mean, I made wines for a few years, or I worked at some companies, and to think that every vintage we would press the white grapes and we would throw the skins away. So there was like a lot of unanswered questions within those skins. And I thought by doing the orange wine or the skin contact wine, actually, you know, this way I can learn a lot more about what different flavors you can explore in, you know, when it comes to, let's say, for instance, just a Shannon. So that was a big inspiration for me. And then I started working with this one farmer on the Abbotsdale side. So it was a little bit away from the Paardeberg. It was not the granite soil. It's more like the ferrocrit soil, higher clay content, just to see how differently that is as well. And the first vintage was like a kind of like a roller coaster, because you make something, and my only reference, or one of the few references, were Craig's wines. And at that stage, I didn't drink a lot of orange wine. So you go into something and you don't know what's going to be the outcome. So it was very interesting. I remember made the wines, going through all those processes, eventually bottling the wine. And then that Cape wine, when I met you, that's when I showed the first vintage.
Okay.
And I was so nervous pouring that wine at the Cape Wine, because I tasted it, and you know, it's like you're a bit nervous, you're not sure about it, you know, it's like you lack a bit of confidence, and you just need a few people to tell you, oh, but this wine is really good. And it was just amazing to see also the people's reaction when they tasted the wines, and they're all like, oh, but it smells sweet, but it tastes so different, and it's very interesting and stuff. So yeah, for me, it was also a learning process, the whole Elementis thing. Working with those vineyards, working with the grapes, starting to explore, you know, the style of wine. And I think there's still so much to learn. And that's why, I'm super glad that we could have been through we've done now, I think, 12 vintages of this. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's just each vintage has got its own different challenges. And that's also why, for instance, we started another one in 2018, the Sleeping Co-Pilot, different varietal, but more fragrant. Because I think it's just, we still have only a few references in this country, and it's still a very young category. And I'm pretty sure that many years ago, when people started red wines on skin contact or whatever, they probably went through the same phases before eventually, you know, after a few decades, they kind of like got into the whole thing.
Exactly. Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing with the wines, you know, somewhere it has to start. And obviously in the first few years, there will be a lot of questions. And I mean, you'll probably touch on that later.
Well, no, I was going to ask you, how is obviously from a beginning with no experience, and the second year you have 100% more experience, and the next year you have 50% more experience. How has your treatment of, or the making of Elementis changed? Have you had to change things in the vineyard, or is it more in the winery? Where is the...
I don't like what you did there with those percentages.
After 1 year you have one vintage experience. After 2 years you have two.
That's why I hate math.
It's 100% more.
Yes, we did make a few adjustments in the vineyards.
Okay.
Obviously, one thing we also had to realize was that it's skin contact. So obviously, you're talking about high pHs in the wine. You need to keep that in mind as well. And then also, I think the way we worked in the winery, I think we started to working a little bit cleaner in the winery, not necessarily making the wines cleaner, but just the whole sanitation process and everything. And then also kind of like Craig, where we also started to do shorter time on the skins. We probably went from 3.5 weeks to now we would do about 2 weeks. And maybe in the beginning it was a bit more, I would say, we worked a bit more reductive, where now we work more oxidative with the grapes and the skins. Okay. And then also, as you go through the years and you taste the wines and stuff, I kind of like realized what I really like, what styles I really like. We sit in a country that's quite warm, it's quite hot, even though now everywhere it's hot in the world. But we've got a lot of sun, we've got a lot of flavors in the grapes. There's never a problem in this country where we have problems with like, especially in Swartland, slow ripening or grapes that doesn't ripen. So for me, from the beginning, it was all about capturing the flavor, capturing the fruit. Texture is very important in the wines. But I think in my mindset, it's like I'm trying to make an orange wine in a warmer climate country. So I think the climate plays a very big part for me when it comes to the style of the wine and also how for the wine to express itself and how to express the wine. So I think that's a big thing. And maybe if you move towards, or if you drink the more European skin contacts, if you move a bit more towards the eastern part of Europe, there is maybe more tannin structure in the wines compared to the Elementis. But I think over here for me, it's like chasing the fruit and see how we can get that kind of like juicy tannins, very subtle fruit. I think that for me is key. And
That's a brilliant point.
Which is why I'm also a very big fan of South African skin contact wines. I really like it, and I think
You prefer them from warmer climates and drier climates?
I prefer them, definitely from warmer dry climates.
I found, look, I learned a lot from Jürgen when he started working on these clay soils with the Elementis. It brings out I always like that. It gives that. It's not a patting session, but I mean, he got something different that I never get on the Albandito, which is he gets a more kind of fruit. He gets way more fruit, which I enjoyed, and that obviously was the first thing. Everybody when we started was like, oh, but all the orange wines taste the same because from around the world, it's wherever you do it, it tastes the same. I mean, for sure, but you can just put the same, just change orange to red wine. It's the same thing.
They'll have something in common, doesn't mean they're all the same.
That doesn't mean they're all the same. So different vineyard sites, you just need more and more people doing it, and you get that. So we also saw it as a tool there's the baby bunnies of the Stay Brave that we make. That wine we worked with the vineyard and we used to just press it straight, put it to tank, but the wine was fairly boring. So it was the perfect case for introducing. That's how Stay Brave came about. Was we dropped the vineyard, working with a farmer but it's great fruit. But we started working with skin maceration, and it gave you this texture.
More interest, more texture,
Yeah.
just a more interesting one.
Exactly. But coming back to what Jürgen was saying about the warmer climates, I think in the warmer climates we need to be slightly more restrained. Where I mean, we were all, Jürgen and I stood next to each other, and Stormpy, unfortunately, he's not here, but. He's eating kebabs in London, but we stood next to each other at many a wine fair in London and in Europe, and it's always you have the South Africans and then you have the Georgians opposite us. So that was always John Verdeman, and then there was Iago, and then they had the monastery, the monks, these guys. I mean, and these guys could not be more different, but they were making wines that were out of this world. And we spent evenings just at Georgian supras with them in London, and it's a different way of experiencing wine. I've never been to Georgia, but I need to go. But I've got a good understanding of a bit of their culture, and that I like that element of that in the orange wines as well, because it goes well with food and tannin, and it was a celebration. It's about a celebration. But I mean that's the feeling side of it. But I think that's good enough.
You make a wine from a neighbouring vineyard that doesn't have skin contact.
Yes.
Yeah. How differently do you have to treat those two vineyards?
Yeah.
Do you have to treat it differently with the foresight that you're going to use skin contact?
So this wine you're drinking now is from the block called Tom Libber's old place, called the Observatory or Bosgasfontein. So at the top of the farm, I use those grapes which are on much more well-drained soils for the wine I make called Cortez, but it just makes a Chenin that's much more linear, low pH, massive acidity. Much more. I use that for my dry white, and then I use the vineyards at the bottom of the farm, which obviously where the water goes somewhere. So in a vintage like this, you can't get a tractor in there; it's underwater. There's a lot of water in the soil, so that you get much bigger berries, and it needs the skin contact to actually uplift the wine.
Okay.
So we identified that over time. But in the beginning, we just did it because on gut feel.
Okay.
But it's worked out quite well for us.
Yeah, you've touched on this already, but I mean, obviously we've got 3 Chenins in front of us. Why did you choose Chenin? Is that because that was what was available to you, or was it a specific characteristic of that Chenin that you thought would work with skin contact? I mean, I know that you both make skin contact wines with other varieties, but it seems that Chenin is a favourite variety for skin
Yeah, for me personally, I think it was in that style that I wanted to make it. I felt like Chenin Blanc had like, it was not a very aromatic grape like a Muscat or a Viognier or those kind of varietals. So it had those nice primary flavors that I wanted to work with and wanted to express in the wine, and also nice acidity to back it up. So I think that's kind of like why I decided to work with that. So it's almost like, yeah, those bit more mellowed down flavors, and then I wanted to see, working with the skins, what I could do with that, how we can bring it out more into the wine, how we can make the wine a bit more expressive. Also, I mean, like I said, with the Sleeping Co-Pilot, it's a lot different. It's maybe a lot easier because also already with the aromatic grape, you know, the flavors are already there. So for me, it was kind of, for myself, I think working with a varietal where we just wanted to see what we can do with this grape varietal and how we not want to manipulate the varietal and also the whole process, but how the wines will express themselves in that sense. And I mean, I was also fortunate enough to know the one farmer in the Epicel area at that stage, and I know these grapes were available. So yeah, and I think that was kind of like why I decided to go with that. Yeah.
Well, Craig, you make a skin contact wine from Muscat, from Hanaport, which is a super aromatic variety. Do you have to treat that the same as the Chenin, or is it the same thought process, or is it for a different reason?
I think, I mean, I could sit here and say that Chenin's the best for skin contact or this and that, but I honestly think any white wine on the right soil, white grape, could make a good skin contact. Okay. It just depends on the site, and there's many factors that come into play. Chenin, I started with Chenin because there's a wealth of Chenin in this country. Outside of the Loire, it's the biggest plantings of Chenin, and I remember Terry Puzela, I don't know, from Clotter to Bird.
There's more Chenin in South Africa than in the Loire.
Yeah, could be, but he came up to me in London the one time, and I was pouring, it was 2011, the skin contact, and he said, he literally said, why would you F up Chenin? It's the king of white grapes. But for these guys in the Loire, it's like Chenin is the holy grail. And it got me thinking, actually, like, why? But because we have a lot of it and access to it. And so that doesn't, obviously it didn't deter me, but he now makes a skin master Chenin. But it's not because of me, but it's just that he was a hero of mine back then. It was but we did one from Haas-Levelou, which I think is amazing. It gives tannin. But on the Muscat Alexandria, you have, or Hanaport, such a big berry like that. Without the skin contact, it can make a slightly boring, soapy, dry white wine. But as soon as we added the skins, it uplifted the wine completely. It gave you a bit of tannin, which you kind of, that wine in particular is almost, it's not orange in color at all, but it's spent 2 weeks on the skins. But it has the structure of a normal white wine, but that structure is actually coming from the skins and not from just the normal pressing. So
it sounds like skin contact or macerating with skins is a way to sort of increase the intensity of otherwise maybe, more diluted.
I see it as a tool now.
Yeah.
As a tool to make a wine better.
So almost concentrate the flavor.
Exactly. Yeah.
Got a couple of questions from the live stream, and guys, live, please jump in if you've got any questions. I'll grab you in a second. With skins, this is from Guy. With skin contact being organic grapes, a huge component of what you do is that obviously using more of the grape is being organic more important in skin contact than traditional white wines.
I don't necessarily think so. Okay. Yeah, it depends on the style. I mean, I know people that make skin contact wines from non-organic grapes, and it tastes amazing and it's really good. Yeah. So personally for me, I don't necessarily think so. Yeah. Okay. So,
yeah. Look, we only work with organic grapes, and always have, always will. But I think there's I mean, I echo what Jürgen said, but I mean, there's guys. It's nice when I remember at the Lumsford Days 2011, we had what was his name? Razvan. He was the winemaker at Niederberg. Mm-hmm. He came to taste with us and talk about skin macerated white wines. And this is like Niederberg, a massive, they're looking at doing, it hasn't quite taken off, I think, yet with them. But it's interesting that you have these bigger guys now, like Charles Back is into it. And it's very important, I think, that you have these guys doing that. But I think organic grapes, I just think you fermenting the way we ferment, you're fermenting naturally. Look, you're still spraying sulfur and copper on the vine, so there's that, but it's obviously when I just think you just get that little bit more.
Okay.
And that's my personal feeling,
Yep.
and that's why we do it. Yeah.
And one more from the live stream, and then we'll go back of the room there. If you're not doing post-fermentation maceration, how important is it to taste the wine? This is a question from Liam. During fermentation, to keep an eye on tannin and extraction. Is that super important for you, or is it more of a recipe sort of type of vibes? You know, you do 6 days, you do 7 days, you do 2 weeks, no matter what, or how does that work?
For me, I taste a bit, but I think for me the most important is because we do open top ferment, so we get oxidation after a while. For me, it's very important to look at the state of the grapes. As the skin starts to turn more brown, it becomes obviously more oxidized, and then you go into that volatile process, stage as well, and we try to prevent that. So, for me, trying to rather have a look at the grapes, also feel the temperature. The grapes and the temperature, those are two very big factors for me. That's also why when we do the fermentation, we do once a day PGRs for the feed, because that way also we can feel where the warm and the cooler pockets are in the tank. Gives you a better understanding. And then, I have a look at the grapes, at the skins. I think the skin, that plays a major part for me.
So what are you looking for? What are your triggers?
If I see it starts to brown very quickly, then, you get into those kind of like dangerous stages where it can go volatile very quickly.
Okay.
So we always trying to prevent that. And we actually had it in the one vintage. Luckily, we stopped it, just in time. But that's the one challenge of orange wines or skin contact wines, You need to really be on it, because we did a PGRs the night, we left the cellar, and the next morning we walked in and I smelled like, it was some kind of like vinegar smell in the cellar. We walked to the tank, and luckily it was only the top layer of the skin that was like volatile. So we scraped it off and it was perfectly fine. I mean, the VA of the wine was 0.6, so no problem. But that was just amazing how quickly it could change. And, it's like you really need to keep your finger on it the whole time. Otherwise, if you just leave it for 24 hours, it can all go wrong. So for me, it's more about visual.
Okay.
And yes, I would say in week 2, every now and then we will taste it when we do like the PGRs, just to see more. It's more about the tannin, just to see, maybe do we work it too much? Is it extracting too much tannin? Because like I said before, I really enjoy the orange wines or the skin contact wines that for me is more fruit driven. So you also don't want the wines to be too bitter and extract too much. So I think in week 2, yes, for Elementis. But I think for me, the big thing is the state of the grapes, and also I think temperature-wise.
Are you doing PGRs as well, or do you do pump overs?
Yeah, I don't do. So there's many different factors, obviously. If anybody wants to follow my recipe, it's on the back of the bottle. It says 10 days maceration, so I think you'll be just fine if you follow that. But I make jokes, but there is truth in that. I think if you do, you can do many different things, and just because you're doing something doesn't mean that it's the right thing, or that just because you're doing something means that you have to do something. But I have literally stepped back a bit. Jürgen talked about temperature. It's very important. The grapes come in from the vineyard, wherever they are, from our farm or other farms. It goes straight into the cold room overnight, goes down to 6 degrees. Then I work the grapes. And I think that is one way to preserve the fruit and obviously keep a healthy natural ferment. So I pick on taste and I press on taste. When the wine tastes good, I pick it. When it tastes good, I press it. So whether it's 10 days, 14 days, but obviously then I look at previous vintages and see what kind of worked and what didn't, and look at that. But that, I will PGRs it, I'll mix it, whether that's by foot or with a stick, the day before I press it. If I feel it needs to be mixed again, then I'll do it. But
you don't do...
No.
Okay.
No, but I will put it in the tank. So I work with 2,000 to 2,500 litre tanks, open top, but I have this very thin plastic that I close it with.
Okay.
I rather work with smaller,
Not open top, but kind of open
a
top.
lot of them. Yeah, and it keeps the gas in there.
Yeah, okay.
And then,
Protects it from oxidation.
then when I feel it needs to, exactly, when it needs to, it looks like this big dome. When it needs to be mixed, I mix it. Yeah.
And do you de-stem,
I de-stem it, yeah. In the beginning, yeah, that's a good point, actually, because my wine is completely de-stemmed, so it's whole berry. So in the beginning, I used a lot of the stems, but I found that gave a lot of a bit too many funky flavors that can make aggressive tannin on the wine.
Almost
Yeah.
a bit too characterful.
Yeah, a little bit that masks kind of what I'm looking for. Yeah.
We've got a question from Mark Hawkins on the magnets as well. But we've got a question.
Cousin.
Yeah.
Which regions or winemakers influence your technique in making the orange wines?
The question was which winemakers or regions influenced for the influenced. I mean, you spoke about the beginnings, and you spoke about Georgia as well. Have the Georgians influenced you on what you're doing?
100%, yeah.
Okay. In what ways?
Oh, I mean, they made the original orange wines. Georgia's a fascinating country. I mean, they've actually got very young vines as well. So it's kind of like a new world, but very old world. So they influence, but my biggest influence was the Northern Italians and the Slovenians. There's like Gravner, obviously Gravner's like the original guy there. Radikon, Princic, these guys, they all made incredible, and obviously Mr. Tessalonga, he was the original. And yes, they influenced me in that, just in terms of what you can and can't do. And these guys do long macerations. And I think what Jürgen was talking about earlier with a lot of, I don't want to talk for them, but I mean, very cool climates, those longer macerations can help because we have the sun, it's there. We just got to kind of restrain it where they have less of the sun. Well, they're getting a lot more now, but they need to kind of
using
harness
the
it.
information, you're not trying to replicate what they're doing.
Yeah, but it's not as complicated as it might seem. To what we say is really not difficult.
You
But
do make it sound very difficult.
do something, and if you enjoy it, like it, do it again, or where can you improve? Yeah.
And you know, over the journey, other regions or
I would
winemakers
say
influenced you?
Italy probably. There's a winemaker, Di Navolo, in Emilia Romagna. He's actually also the winemaker for La Stoppa. I really like his wines because that's also a bit more of a drier region, but more warmer climate. Wines from Sicily. I'm a very big fan of Sicilian wines because the rami that he makes. So I find those wines fascinating as well, and it's interesting how we kind of like all moved back towards Italy as well. Obviously Josko Gravner, and when he started off in 1997, it's amazing, and also to see how those wines age today and how structured those wines are and the different textures you have on those kind of wines. So yes, I kind of like would say Italy for me is quite a big influence. And then, like I said, it's amazing to see what this country is doing. I mean, I've got a good friend, MC Stander, who makes from El Equinox. He makes amazing muscat. I really like it. I enjoy the ones from Craig as well, Manchke, all those guys. So I think even in this country, there's a lot of younger guys doing some very exciting stuff, and it's amazing to follow them also to learn from them. So yeah.
Very cool. Thank you. The question from Mark Hawkins has already been addressed. He was asking about do SA wine regulators now accept these wines, but we touched on that at the very beginning. So
Can you ask him what's the rugby school?
I can actually.
Okay.
What are you've touched on the challenges of making skin contact wines and the advantages. Are these wines that you can make in big quantities? It seems not that you have to do sort of big hands-on and smaller parcels. Is that a fair question or fair assessment? A fair assumption, sorry?
Well, I guess at the end of the day, it's like you're fermenting on skins. It's like if you can do red wines in bulk on skins, then you can probably do, white wines or white grapes on skins as well. And it depends on what style you do it. But for me and with Interlega, we like to keep it smaller and in smaller ferments, in smaller productions. And for instance, like we never use cooling during fermentation, so we try to do we ferment in like smaller tanks as well. And we kind of like to push the fermentation temperatures up between 25, 26, 27. So I think like in fermenting in smaller containers for us, it's pretty cool, and we can do what we want to in that. So that's why we will kind of like keep it within smaller volumes. But I think it's definitely possible and stuff. But then again, just thinking about it now, imagine you work in a co-op and you've got a 10,000 liter tank and you do a skin contact there, and you do the settings for like automatic pump overs. You can extract quite a bit, it can become quite tannic. So I've never done it, I've never tried it, but...
So essentially, you can't make it exactly like red wine, you have to be a little more gentle.
Yeah, because look, I mean, a cab that's very tannic, people will still love it and drink it, and that's fine, but I think a skin contact wine that's super tannic, some people might struggle with that. So So yeah, I
Yeah,
think
but maybe to answer your question in a different way, it depends on what popular opinion, which is the consumer,
Yes.
wants. And I think we started with 2 barrels of that wine, 2 small barrels, so 400 liters, 450 liters, and I couldn't sell a bottle. Literally couldn't sell a bottle, yeah, which led to me exporting. But now it's our most we make the Stay Brave, the skin that we make. I mean, those volumes stay the same, but Stay Brave, we can't supply enough of it. And
So how many bottles of skin contact wine are you producing a
we
year?
produce maybe
approximately?
between 30 35,000, which is small by big guys' standards, but by our standards, that's enough to put food on the table, plus other wines.
Yeah, from 15% zero to...
Yeah, exactly. But it just shows you but it's not really about the numbers. It's about being comfortable with what you want to do as well, but also where your people are drinking. I mean, I go to Cape Town. I remember the Cape Wine when I first met you, 2015. So that was when I first realized, hang on, I can actually sell.
2012.
So 2012. So but 2015 was when I realized I could maybe start selling wine in South Africa.
Yeah.
Because I walked into, it was a public wine bar back then, and some young lady came in next to me and said, "Can I have a glass of your orange wine, please?" And I was like, "I've never heard that before."
Yeah.
And then but obviously overseas it had been happening for a lot, so it happens. But I don't think it'll ever be. I mean, and who cares really if it is massive or not? It's about people enjoying what they want and understanding what they want to drink.
Well, it's interesting that the history of skin contact wines sort of got meshed in with natural wine as well.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, most, if not all, skin contact wines were also natural wines. But now those two things are not necessarily, they can be mutually exclusive. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Is it just a thing? What's the...
I'll go then on the two, but maybe with the natural wine, skin macerated wine, orange wines and natural wines, they came together. They were shown at the same fairs, which were the natural wine fairs back 2011 was the first real wine fair. The English-speaking one, the Div, had been going a bit before that, and that was when. So the two were kind of together, but now obviously it's broken away because you need to kind of show wine in together. So there was that commonplace is like to show our wines. It was at the natural wine fairs, but obviously the world's moved on, and it's always has been and always will be just about wine and producing quality wine. But you need some kind of pedestal to talk about it, and those were the natural wine fairs, and they still are, which is great. But I think, and it was obviously different. I mean, here's a bottle, you can see this is something different. So people associated natural with skin contact, but now I think people are realizing that it's two different things, hopefully, and it's moving on. Yeah.
Good question.
A quick one for Jürgen. What's the difference between the two vintages and why did you change it?
What's the difference between the two vintages?
They are quite different.
So actually interesting. Craig talked about. Craig showed the 2017, which is a great vintage. I brought the 22 and 16, which were like, for me, quite a challenge. 2016 was very hot, very warm. I remember we harvested super early. We had a very early growing season. 2022 last year, it was a late growing season, and then you all know we had those heat waves in January, and then all of a sudden, it's almost like the vines were not ready for it, So it was kind of like two tricky vintages, and I really wanted to show them side to side, and also to show how the 16 can age, and also the 22, the younger one and the potential. In 2016, we did about 17, 18 days on the skins. It was decent. And then 22, we did about 13 days on the skins. So the 2016 was a little bit longer on the skins. And then aging in barrel was basically exactly the same time. But it was just interesting, like I said, leading up to 2016 vintage, you go from an early growing season into a very warm vintage. I remember, I would never forget it, Kali said, anybody who didn't add acid in 2016 is lying. And I was standing there, it's like I didn't add any acid to my wines. And I still didn't add acid. So I was very proud of myself. And then you have 2022 vintage where we all thought, it's going to be late. I mean, you would know yourself. And then all of a sudden we had, I think it was the third week in January where South Africa were the warmest place in the world. And that kind of like screwed things up a bit. So I think biggest thing was obviously the climate and how it led up into those vintages and harvest season. But then fermentation-wise, very much the same. Both were destemmed. The element is the 2016 was just a little bit longer on the skins. But aging-wise and barrels and stuff as well, 5-liter barrels. So yeah, nothing different. So I think it's mostly vintage. Yeah.
That leads me into another question from the live stream about élevage. So after fermentation, after pressing, you're aging in barrels, old barrels, new barrels, big barrels, small barrels, a mix.
So we can't afford any new barrels, so only old barrels. So yeah, so it's old barrels, 500-liter barrels, and they're probably about 10, 15 years old. Yeah. So.
And is obviously budget is a factor. You know, you can only do what you can afford to do. If you had unlimited budget, what would you be? How would you be? Would you make any changes?
I would probably buy 20 new stocking there. Yeah, look, we would probably move a bit more towards the bigger food risks and try out that. But that said, interesting enough, every year we also age a little bit in smaller barrels, 2 to 5s.
Okay.
And I actually love what that also gives you. You know? It's a little bit different. The 500 is a bit more subtle, but I like the intensity in the food in the smaller barrels. So it's a difficult one, yeah.
Yep.
But both ways I like it, and I mean what both barrels gives you, you know, it's quite interesting. So, and I think that's also the cool thing about skin contact wines, you know, it's like, because it's so expressive, you know, in whatever container you will age it, you know, it will almost like start to form its own identity. And that's what I really like about the wines as well. So, and that's why I say, for me, it's just, I mean, winemaking is a learning process, you know, and every vintage, you know, it's like somebody once said, you know, if you one day die at 70, you might have 50 chances in life to make wines. And every vintage for me is a chance to try and do something different and see how the wines evolve and learn a bit more about it. And I think one of the big reasons why I continue making skin contact wines and why I like making skin contact wines is like, I feel like every vintage I learn quite a lot, you know. Not that I don't learn from making red wines and white wines, but these wines just kind of like have different challenges. And yeah, so for me, yeah, either way it works.
And Craig, your élevage for
Yeah, I mean,
is it varied on the parcel or the
It,
variety?
so look, it depends on the kind of, we've identified, it depends on the kind of wine that we feel that vineyard is going to make. So like my skin vineyard is very low pH. It needs the wood to kind of flesh it out a little bit and the mallow that goes with that. So we use big old fridges. If we don't have enough to fill that fridge, we go into 500-liter barrels. And the Stay Brave, which has a slightly higher pH, we go into a fiberglass tank and a concrete tank. It keeps the wine tighter. So it's which softens it out.
And lower pH is a more stable environment.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
Bacteria and
So-
you know, less things can go wrong.
Yes, yeah. So that's exactly. So that's, you know, but and then putting something at a slightly higher, you know, low acidity, high pH into something inert, you know, that doesn't really breathe, is a better idea.
Ageability. I mean, the three wines in front of us of different age. I get confronted with people saying, "Oh, the orange wines don't age, natural wines don't age." Clearly, they do. These three wines are still in their prime. Is picking early than conventional wines and not adding acid, is that a big factor, or is it more about the tannin, or is it a combination of everything, multifactorial?
I think it's a combination. I still always go back to my reference. It's not a skin contact wine, but I do the Chenin Blanc, Intelega Chenin Blanc. And in 2012, the pHs were kind of like high and the acidities were very low. We never acidified. And even if I drink those wines today, it's super fresh. And people sometimes will send me a photo and they're like, you see, it's nice acidity and stuff. And actually, if they know how low the acidity is, they will actually be like, whoa. So that kind of like, I've always been like, yes, your acidity is low, but I mean, if you acidify whatever, you know, in any case, over time, going to drop out. It's going to get back to the same stage. So, yeah, so I think picking earlier, getting a bit more, having more natural acidity will definitely, the wines will definitely benefit from that, for sure.
Do you find that Alimentus ages more gracefully than your normal, quote unquote, normal Chenin Blanc? Or does the tannin actually help it age, do you think?
The tannin does play a role,
Yeah.
for sure.
Obviously, they're on different soils, aren't they, as well?
Yeah, on totally different soils. Look, it's amazing. I think if you have Chenin on granite soils, and I mean, like the Tessalonga as well, I think it's amazing to see how those Chenins age. I just think it gives it a bit more like a fresher kind of vibe to the wine as well, and maybe also with the pHs, you have a lower pH, higher acidity. So, I'm kind of like very envious, you know, of Craig in that. I think with the more ferric soils, we have a little bit higher pHs, lower acidities in the wines. We can't pick too early. We can't really go lower than 11.5 alcohol, because then kind of like we don't get the flavor profile that we're looking for. So I think yes, but also I think the terroir plays a massive role. I think had I made skin contact wines on just granite, it probably would have aged a little bit longer than, for instance, on a ferric that we work with now. But I'm still very happy because I drank a 2011 the other day, and the wine still held up very nicely. So these wines can age.
Yeah, I mean, the 2016 wasn't a great vintage in South Africa by any stretch of the imagination. So it's not overly surprising, but the wine still looks super fresh. I mean, it looks very dark in the bottle. I was going to ask you about that as well. Do you deliberately have a clear glass of Flint bottle so people can show off the colour?
Yeah.
The idea there, or
Look, for me, it's
just avoid the problem where they open the bottle and they pour and they go, holy.
exactly.
So you remove that step, that problem.
No, look, for me it's nice, and you know, when we started off with Intellego, like all my labels, they're very colourful labels. I find a lot of joy in making those wines and working with those labels and showcasing them, you know, when we go to wine fairs or whatever. And I just feel like I really like the colour of these skin contacts.
And putting it into a Flint bottle, you know, it also, you know, it actually goes together with the label as well. So for me, it's really cool. And I know there's a lot of people that sometimes will ask me, listen, but you know, it's not good for the ageability of the wine. But I mean, you're not going to buy a bottle of Alimentus that's standing in the shelf somewhere in a window, you know, with this direct sunlight. So yeah, it's not an issue for me. It's not a problem. It's something visual that I really like, and
reason why we went with that, and I enjoy it. You know, it's always nice, and I think it just brings another element too when you open the wines and drink the wines, or at the tasting and you see, you know, these wines. And it's the same with the pink moustache, you know, the red as well.
Yeah, it's an arresting visual. I mean, and look at the Stephen Co followed up on the wall there.
Yeah, exactly.
And Craig, do you find that your skin contact wines age more gracefully than the wines that you press out? Or?
I think a good vineyard will age regardless of the wine, but I think with, you know, you ask yourself what is aging. Aging is the breaking down of compounds. So this is why sweet wines age the longest, and Madeiras are generally even longer because they have sugar and alcohol, and they take longer to break down. And you add then tannin to, so like my Cortez and this are almost the same wine, even though they're on the same farm. They're slightly different. I mean, but that wine will age a very long time, but I think the tannin will just give the wine something to break down a bit longer, so it will age a bit longer.
But the Cortez, as you said, maybe has generally a
More
lower
aci-
pH and more
yes.
acidity in this wine. So it sort of evens out in this, perhaps.
That's it. I think the skin macerated white wines should, in theory, age longer. But by adding tannin, you're increasing the pH, so it's making it.
Yeah. So you
again,
sort of
pros
and
so
cons.
it will definitely.
Yeah.
You got tannin to age. Yeah.
Cool. We've reached halfway, so we're going to reset your glasses. So please just empty your glasses either via the traditional method, or you can pour it out into the spittoons. Live streamers, bear with us for 5 to 10 minutes while we pour the second flight, and go grab a cup of tea or open up another bottle of wine, and we'll be back in 5 to 10 minutes once we've re-poured. Thanks. So the next 3 wines are on your sheet. Raven Pinot Gris 2022, And then Thorn and Daughters Tin Soldier 2019, from left to right.
Nice black component.
Just in the top shelf there. Do you need? Water. Thanks. Do we need just one more? I don't remember the maps, so I might as well pour them out.
Ja,
I'll take the rest.
maar ja, het is mij interessante jaren.
Ja, met mijn baas. Laat ik jou eens.
Ja, die goed, volgens mij zo goed kan verhouden. Ja, vol.
Mijn boven.
So,
Ja, het zijn 14 bij zo'n
3
groep.
as they sit.
Het is crazy, ja. Ja, ja.
Yeah, I'm the one next to the water glass.
Ik denk dat ze uit gaan decant en die bottelen. Hier voor staan, maar dat is een 21. So, ja.
Magnum's age well.
Weet je baie van die weinige broodjes wat ja.
Maar niet alles is skin contact. So, met normale wijnen.
Ja.
Wat de zak is, maar ik vind dat het is ook moeilijk te zeggen. Voor iemand die kan zeggen wat goede wijn is, die waar van die wijn is. Just funky wines, like
Ja.
badly made. And you know, like all the things that can go wrong did go wrong. But if you find the good ones, they're phenomenal. They're super from small places. You know, locally as well. Look at you.
Which one's your first glass there?
Which was that?
This one over here.
I poured water. Sorry.
Okay, this is wine number 1. Okay.
I thought it was your water glass.
So do I talk about this one?
No. I can buy that one.
You got water. Do you want a bigger pour, that is? He pours himself like a...
That's right.
Thanks, James.
Tenfold.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can afford nothing moustache.
It smells like a glass. It smells shit.
How does Pedigree get this kind of sorry,
Ken je?
Pedigree guys, not is this oxidized? Pedigree looks like this.
Het is mij dop, ja. Het is
Ja.
dop, ja.
Are they really
It's a green, so it's green is reddish. Yeah. Green. Grey. Yeah. Oh really?
I've seen a photo of it.
They like
Ja, zoals amper pinkerig.
it's like half. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
I don't know why did they call it green? Because
Green. Grey. Yeah. The green. All the greens
Ze
are.
smeken ernaast grill. Ja, als je het hard skin contact doet dan.
Think it, think it up.
Yeah.
Ja, ja.
Ik dacht dit is meer bitter.
Nee. Hier is,
No,
ja.
it's the grapes are like almost like his nose color.
Ja. Maar wacht tot ik 2 dagen niet zo was.
I can't see my nose, so it's probably your nose.
Where's that?
Oh, my brother paid for the live stream.
Is hier tennis bal? Okay, so he's fucking good. Okay, but all
Serious?
He's really playing in the paddle league. But no, you'll play. Fucking ask him.
We've got 4 people set in the future.
No, just ask him. He's a fucking good tennis.
Yo.
No, he played
Yeah,
for
of
the
course.
top.
Cool.
Really?
Swam for the top.
I can actually go and search because I've got the app now.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you can get a rating and you can see how good people are.
Plays.
Play against random people.
Okay, does everyone have all 3 wines? You're missing
Thank
half.
you.
I missed you, sorry.
It's quite fit actually.
How's Grande?
Yeah, good. I actually stayed with Mark this weekend. Sorry, it's happening on
Can we just do this one very briefly?
right there. Watch South Africa lose. But it's like you said, you know, yeah. Yeah, Bob, yeah. What's he doing? He's telling naughty stories. No, really. Yeah, no,
Telling stories.
he thinks he's funny. He's not funny.
Some of the stuff probably repeated.
Yeah, I know.
Dinner.
Yeah, I buy 20% more than we're going to eat to feed the kids. They love it. So good. Okay, I think we're back. Got a quick question from online to address, which I meant to ask in the first session, which I didn't, which is a very good reminder. Thank you for asking it. Serving temperature for skin contact wines. Are we sort of more in the red wine category, more in the white wine? How do you drink your skin contact wines?
Yeah, it's a good. I like all my wines to start off slightly chilled. It's just because we're in a hot place normally.
Yes.
Indoor is very hot, so it's, I need it. We can always warm up, but it's very difficult to cool it down. But I'd say a perfect temperature would be like a red wine, just slightly lower than a red wine, in between the two.
So what, like mid-teens?
Like the category is. It's not white, it's not red. It's in between.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
there.
Thanks for not answering the question, Greg. That's excellent.
I'm a fence sitter.
So do you put them in the fridge?
Always, yeah.
Okay. But it is 45 degrees most days in the Indica.
Exactly.
So are you drinking straight out of the fridge? Are you bringing them out sort of...
First, I have a beer, which
Yes.
is like freezing.
Yeah.
You open it, it literally like
Yes,
freezes
absolutely.
up.
Yeah. Otherwise,
And then the
otherwise you
skin
taste it.
contact after that
Okay.
is cold. I like it. I like the wine slightly cold. I mean, all
chilled.
seriousness, I think it, but it does warm up, and then you get all the flavor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jürgen?
Yeah, I like to drink it a bit more chilled, but it's really interesting for me to see how, as the wines warm up, how they start to open up. And actually, my wife can never understand that, but that's actually when I feel the wine a bit more, I start to understand the wine a bit more, the wine starts to become more expressive. So I actually like it. I like to see that whole phase that the wine's going through, and as the wines kind of like evolve as it warms up, and that's when you kind of like see the true colors of the wine. So yeah, it is nice to drink it at 14 or 13 degrees, but I actually also like the fact when the wine starts to warm up to see the true, colors of the skin contact wines.
Yep.
Because sometimes when it's a bit too chilled, a bit too cold, it can be like, it hides a lot of flavors, it's not very expressive. So yeah, I
And it
think
hides a
I'm-
lot of textures as well when it's cold. Exactly. And that's why we drink Castle Light at negative 4 degrees. Otherwise, if it's anything warmer, you actually taste it, which is horrific. I mean, for me, I drink skin contact wines. I have them in the fridge. I open them, pour my first glass, but then I don't put the bottle back in the fridge. And so I drink it as the same. So it starts out at 4 or 5 degrees. As soon as you open it and pour it, it's already sort of 6 to 8 degrees, unless your glass is chilled. And then over the next 27 minutes in the time it takes my wife and I to drink a bottle of wine, gets maybe to 12 degrees. Yeah, it's slow. Yeah. So how you like it is the answer, but to get most out of it, I would think slightly warmer than colder. If you had to choose one or the other, I guess is the answer there. Okay, the wines we've poured here are 3 wines that you guys did not make. So I wanted to bring a few different perspectives. You can relax now. A few different perspectives about skin contact wine. It's not just in the Swartland. It's not just Chenin Blanc. So the 3 wines we have here are the Trizan Seascape, the Sondagskloof 2022, which is 100% Sauvignon Blanc from Sondagskloof WO behind Stamford. We have the Craven Pinot Gris, also 2022, 100% Pinot Gris from Stellenbosch, from Southern Stellenbosch. No, Western Stellenbosch. And Thorn and Daughters, Tin Soldier. So this is another Swartland wine, but this is made with Semillon Gris, in fact, which is not a registered variety, but it's Semillon Gris. So there's a number of different aspects to these three wines, which are different to the first three wines that we tasted. The first one is, as I said, they're different regions, different varieties. But also we're now in the, with these three wines, two of them aren't using 100% skin contact. So they're using only a portion of skin contact in the wine. So part of the grapes have been pressed straight away, and part of the grapes have been fermented on their skins. So just to give you the facts and figures, the Sonntagdorf is 50% skin contact, 50% whole bunch press. The 50% that was skin contact went into new oak barrels for élevage. And then the whole bunch pressed section went into old oak and then blended after 6 months, I believe. The Craven Pinot Gris is 100% skin, 100% concrete. So there's no oak on that wine at all. That was 6 days on skins with one light pump over per day. So not Peugeots, they pump over. It's very hard to get into a concrete tank. And the Tin Soldier is Semillon Gris. 40% is skin contact, 60% is a whole bunch pressed, and that's 7 days in open top fermenters, probably more similar to Jürgen's method. So it's interesting to see immediately the colours of the wines. The first one, I wouldn't think, if someone poured it, I wouldn't think straight away this is a skin contact wine. But once you smell it and taste it, it immediately says to me Sauvignon Blanc. So it's not. It doesn't get away from the variety. If anything, it enhances the variety and shows off more aspects of Sauvignon Blanc than you would otherwise if it was just a direct pressed wine. I'm not sure if the room feels the oak on the nose or on the palate. I think it's been sucked up by the intensity of the fruit, and maybe that goes to what Craig was saying about using skin contact to sort of almost concentrate flavours. Trizan's not here today, but we recently released this wine, and this is her third vintage of this wine. And she, like Jürgen when starting, really was running blind, which is a great way to be because you don't have any preconceived ideas. And so she thought, she made a lot of red wine in her past, in her formative winemaking years, and tannin in red wine likes new oak. So she thought tannin in white wine would like new oak as well. So that was her rationale. It has an extra layer of sweetness to it than the wines, but that could be, as you say, Jürgen, warm climate to relatively cooler climate perhaps. But I certainly think that the oak is playing a role here. The Craven Pinot Gris, these guys, Mick and Janine Craven out of Stellenbosch. So this is, Western Stellenbosch. This is on in the Polka Dry Road, farm called Newlands. So this is 7 days on skins in a big concrete square, essentially. So no oak there. So it's going to be interesting to hear your thoughts about oak versus no oak. Pinot Gris, if you have never seen it in the wild, on the vine, it has a pinkish hue to the grapes. So usually Pinot Gris is a white wine because winemakers generally press off, separate the juice and the skins early in the piece, where the skins don't have a chance to pigment the juice. So that's why most Pinot Gris you've ever had in your life won't be as dark as that. It's interesting talking to Janine. I'm not sure when Mick even knows where the vineyards are, but Janine is very intimate with the vineyards, and she says that the colours seem to be getting darker and darker on the grapes. They have gone a more sort of no pesticide and no herbicide route on the vineyard. So it's going to be interesting to see whether that's a result of a change in farming or a result in climate. So that's really, really interesting. It's the first wine that we sold from them was almost sort of like a dark copper colour, and now it's a properly light red wine colour. I mean, it looks almost similar to your pink moustache in intensity, not in hue. You've got more pink sort of character in the pink moustache, but in terms of hue. It's a very similar colour. So that's I wouldn't necessarily think that's a Pinot Gris when someone poured that for me straight away. I mean, Pinot Gris is a famously pretty inert variety anyway. So maybe a great, again, what Craig was saying, maybe a great candidate for getting skin contact to get a bit more intensity, a bit more concentration in the wine. And I poured the third wine, the Semillon Gris. This was the first skin contact wine that we sold as a company back in 2014. The maiden release of Tin Soldier, which was 100% skin contact, and it blew people's minds. When we released it, people didn't know what it was, or they thought it was faulty, too much colour. So I bought it for personal reasons, but also just to show you an older version of the wine. This is before the guys had come up with some great plans to open up a 17 and a 16. So we're opening up a 19 Tin Soldier here in Semillon Gris. So Semillon Gris, for those who don't know, is a mutation of the Semillon grape. Again, has a darker skin, almost like a russet hue. Tends not to be as dark as Pinot Gris, but certainly has more colour than typical Semillon. John, for the Tin Soldier, has started to use less and less skin contact in the wine and more direct pressing component to increase what he calls the vinosity, which essentially means it's more winey. Essentially wants to make it more drinkable, because I think he thought the tannins were interfering with the character of the wine, and wanted to make it a bit more reach out to the drinker a little bit more, and as a bit of a stepping stone. But again, I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on the three wines. Jürgen, you use skin contact as a component in one of your wines. Talk to us about how that came about. Was it a thoroughly thought out plan, or was it on the cuff? What was the inspiration? And is it something that you're going to continue with other wines, do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, it was well thought out. I would think so, and I hope so. It's something that I will definitely continue with. Mm-hmm. I find it fascinating. I think it's very interesting. It opens up another dimension.
Well, maybe talk to us about the wine that you use that sort of components with.
Which one?
The Story of Harry.
So, with the Story of Harry, we do about 40% skin contact on the wine in total. I just think it for me, almost the Story of Harry is like the gateway to orange wines. Because a lot of times, everybody enjoys the skin contact wines, and I think that's kind of like, for me, like an introduction wine. Mm-hmm. When you kind of sitting on the fence, not sure if you really like this wine, if you understand the wine, that's where I think the Story of Harry comes in. And that's why we do only 1 week on the skins, just to bring a bit more fruit to it. And then what is also really cool about the wine is it's a blend of Chenin and Chardonnay. Mm-hmm. At first, when you open the wine, you get a lot of the Chardonnay. It's very expressive. But then, for me, it's always nice to open wines, drink it over a period of 5 or 6 days. Day 2, day 3, it's amazing to see how the Chenin starts to open up, how it comes through in the blend.
Are you doing skin contact with both varieties, or just one? Or
just on the Chenin? Yeah.
Okay, right.
So,
and is all the Chenin in that wine skin contact?
No.
Or
so it's only about 60% of that Chenin is skin contact.
Okay.
And
60% of the 40%? Or,
yeah,
okay.
60% of the Chenin, but 40% of the whole blend.
Craig's brain's exploding.
Yeah, so it makes me think of Ron Burgundy. You know what I'm talking about? 60% all of the time. So that's, and for me actually, that's also very nice working with that wine and making the Story of Harry, because now we work with a component that's non-skin contact and a component that's skin contact, and also to see how the wines interact, how the wines complement each other, and also to see how the wines evolve as a blend. So once again, going back to exploring, trying new things, learning from past experiences and stuff, I think this is something really cool, and every year it's very fascinating to see how it's first a non-skin contact wine that is like very expressive, and then over time it's a skin contact that comes through. So, yeah, and I think.
And how did the idea for that come about? Was it divine intervention?
Well,
or
first of all,
inspiration?
actually, Craig spoke earlier about when he started, Remy Pedreno from Rocktown Languedoc. I worked there in 2011, and climate-wise, it's very close to Nîmes. It's about 10 kilometers from Nîmes in France. For me, it was very similar to the Swartland.
Okay.
And Remy he had a white blend, which was the Chenin Chardonnay. And I was like very fascinated by that, and also in that kind of like climate. And then I think that's where I kind of like got my inspiration from. And then 7-8 years later, I had the opportunity to start to work with Chardonnay in the Swartland.
I didn't even know there was Chardonnay in the Swartland, to be honest.
Yeah.
There mustn't be much of it.
There's not much now.
Okay.
But actually, it's amazing how good a component it is in the blend. And we even at Lamazuk, when I worked with Craig there, we had Chardonnay as well. It worked amazingly in the blend. And sometimes in the blend also you need some grape just to fill that gap. And I felt like Chardonnay, was the right component for that.
What gap did it fill?
So it brings a lot of acidity to the wine. Going back to 2022, last year we had, for me, it was quite tough. It was quite a challenging vintage with the low acidities, the high pHs. And for me, the Chardonnay was my grape with the best acidity. So it was quite nice to bring that through, bring a bit of more freshness in the wine. And that's why I also think in a warmer climate like the Swartland or whichever warmer climate, I think blending also becomes very important. Because at the end of the day, the wines also need to complement each other. And I think with blending, it's just an extra tool that you have to also kind of like get the wine in that direction, on that position that you want it to be. So it was kind of like from Remy, and then started to work with it in the Swartland. Never thought I would work with Chardonnay in the Swartland. The one vintage I did try Chardonnay skin contact, it didn't work. So that's why we decided to not continue the skin contact.
Okay.
So I think some varietals, just quickly to come back, drinking the wines from Trezan now, also at Lamazuk in 2013 we made the Petit Cache, which was a Sauvignon Blanc skin contact, on probably the warmest site in the world, because it was there at the bottom of the farm, and it was actually amazing in this warmer climate to see how well the Sauvignon Blanc did, and actually how expressive the Sauvignon Blanc was. So I don't know if it's because of the grape or maybe because of the winemaker. Craig?
John, it was made in glass.
In glass.
That's why
But
that
that was-
I've been trying to get glass tags.
But that was super interesting. Just to taste, Sauvignon Blanc and thinking about Sauvignon, and look, we're in a warm climate and it's really worked well. And I think it was also.
I mean, there's no mistaking that the Sauvignon Blanc is there in the glass. I mean, there's no. You wouldn't think it's. And it maybe go down. Maybe it's got a bit of Semillon in it, perhaps, but it does feel very Sauvignon Blanc-y.
It does.
Invent a very terrible word.
Better than, what's that other one? Vinosity.
Vinosity.
Yeah.
No, when you get a couple of drinks in Johnny, he gets expressive, which is lovely. And components for skin contact for you, Craig? I mean, you seem to sort of be a bit more sort of polarized on this. You do 100% or zero, or
I think it's a perfect tool is the right word. I mean, what John and Trezan are doing is excellent examples of that. It's exactly what you want to see. You want to see people making wines that it doesn't matter. You don't want to get into the boring details of why. When you drink a glass of wine, it must be good. It must be drinkable and enjoyable. And I think that these hit the nail on the head. And that's exactly what it's for. I mean, Stompy, who's but he's eating kebabs in London.
yes,
I used to at Lamazuk, Jürgen and I were working together, and I used to sell grapes to this guy called Johan, which was Stompy. He never once came to the vineyard, so I used to just send him like these bins, and in between was Sauvignon Blanc and Chenin. He thought he was buying Chenin, but he got mostly Chenin, but he'd never come. But it came in there. He was working for another. It wasn't for Mother Rock. It was for another company he was working. But he would make skin massive. I'm connecting the dots here. He made a white wine that actually won very good awards. If people like awards, then go buy that wine from 2009 from De Heel, I think. But he did like 40% skin maceration on that wine, and it went into that, and it worked out really, really well. But nobody knew that there was skin contact on it. So
Yes. Yeah.
it was for me an eye-opening
Now
experience.
everybody knows.
Yeah, now they know. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you know, the first three wines certainly has a skin contact character to the wines, fairly obvious in those wines, and maybe the age accentuates that a little bit.
Yes.
But in this first wine, you wouldn't necessarily pick up skin contact.
To answer your question,
Yeah.
I make skin contact for skin contact. I want to see that vineyard. I always do single vineyard, single cultivar. I want that vineyard to express that style. I think what works best for that wine, and that vineyard would be skin contact. So I never do half or 50, 40, whatever.
Okay.
20.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I know it is
Yeah,
weird. I was just thinking about that now.
Craig's a 100% guy.
Yeah.
It's not a 50-40.
Yeah. He's polarized and polarizing.
I'm 100%, 60% of the time.
Concrete. Craven Pinot Gris. I mean, you know
Yeah.
the Cravens, but we all know the Cravens very, very well. We love their wines. Are we happy with Concrete? Is this something that you're going to explore, or?
I'll answer this because I know, obviously, we both know the Cravens very well. They're very good friends, good people. They make fantastic wines, and I think this was the wine that when I went to taste in the cellar, they had the same wine in barrel. And so I would say this wine is actually almost, I don't want to talk on their behalf, but for me, as an observer from the outside, it was pre-concrete and after concrete. So after concrete, the wines are just much more expressive, alive in a good way, and this. And I think concrete, I've got a couple of concrete tanks. We built a house last year, so I put concrete into my bricks and not into my cellar. But now that we can start buying concrete tanks again, hopefully. But they definitely, I think, uplift the wine in a very positive sense. It keeps the wine a bit fresher and tighter. And
is it because you're using skins that you said the pH maybe increases, the acidity goes down, the less interaction with oxygen helps that tightness?
100% sure why. I think it goes against logic that concrete's a base. It should, in theory, but you do spray it with this acid to neutralize it first, and maybe that's got something to do with it. But I don't think so. No, it's meant to be inert. But I just think it's more about oxygen.
Inert in terms of oxygen.
I think it's a combination of temperature, oxygen, and and everything. But then this is where you can get real into the weeds of this stuff, because then you can say just put it in a stainless steel. But there's many things, and that's what I love about wine, is that you can't put your finger on any one thing. I mean, you and I did that seminar a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
With the academics from Stellenbosch, where they were like, aren't you interested to know exactly what bacteria is fermenting at 6 o'clock on a Thursday night in your lees, and then this and that. I mean, for them it's fascinating because that's all they do. But for me, it's just you get completely lost. You wouldn't be able to. It's like asking yourself, wouldn't it be interesting to tie your shoelaces with your left finger first and then your pinky, and then it just gets. It's kind of what you do, and you need to. And I think concrete is one of those
You need
things.
to have an eye of the bigger picture.
Yeah, it works. It works in a hot climate really, really well.
Yeah.
It seems to capture that for some reason, and I'm happy with that. That's good for me.
Yeah, and it's certainly one of the more interesting Pinot Gris in South Africa I've tried.
Yeah.
It has more character, obviously more tannin. I'm not sure if the audience agrees. Got a question?
How often do they use it in Europe?
A lot.
How often do they use
It was
Pinot
the
Gris in Europe?
traditional. I mean, the old South African cellars. I mean, there's a few Swartland guys, but I mean, those old capers that we call them. Yeah, they were all. I mean, Artie's cellars full of those old things, but a lot of them were lined with epoxy. Some of them not. At Lamazhoek, the whole cellar is just perfect. It's all concrete. There's a lot of that there. There's a lot of all the traditional. So concrete's part of our kind of heritage here. I mean, I'm not a concrete salesman or I'm not that paid, but I just like what it does, and I think. But on the other side, I also like what old wood does for different things. It's about understanding, I think, what it brings to the wine. But overseas, there's a lot.
Sorry if I can just jump
Okay.
in. But I also think it's very interesting because if you look at the way we made wines back in the day, and then we went through not a phase, and now it's almost like we're reverting back to more fresh style wines. And we're also moving, I can see a lot more people starting to use concrete again. I think also the style of the wine, obviously, and the concrete goes hand in hand. And that's for me, I prefer drinking fresher style wines, maybe low alcohol wines, and that's a good thing about South Africa at the moment. It's like more and more we're starting to see lower alcohol wines again, or not lower alcohol wines, but just fresher style wines. Wines that are more energetic, and I think also with the concrete comes that. And I think also when you taste those wines, and I went to Ardie Bartnos the other day and we tasted the 2023 Mourvèdre out of concrete, and it was just amazing how vibrant the wines were, you know, and it speaks to you. So I think it's interesting to see the times that we're going through. If you think back to the 60s and 70s, and then obviously the 90s and the 2000s, you know, there were a few people that influenced the industries in the world. And I think now kind of like, maybe there's a bit of a different direction again. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, for me, when we first tried to sell Tin Soldier, for example, it was, I mean, similar to you when you were trying to sell the first wines. It was near on impossible to try and get people to understand what was in the glass, essentially. But it's changed so much in 10 years. The complete domestic in wine industry or wine community, if you want to call it something a little bit more friendly than an industry, has changed and continues to change. It's getting more diverse in style and variety. I mean, these three wines in front of you should exemplify that versus the first three wines we had. I mean, all six wines are very, very different. They all have something in common, but they all do their own thing from a similar starting point. They travel their own path, which I think is a great thing about South African wine. And I think that more people using concrete or picking earlier, or more attention to the vineyards, it's not at the detriment of the older style of wine. They still exist. There's still a place for those wines, and long may it be true. I mean, the more options that wine drinkers have when they're drinking South African wine, the better, I think. And as long as there's a market and quality and wine made from the heart rather than made for market or perceived market, which is a very weird concept. The better, I think. So we've got a question at the back. Stop me ranting.
Just you guys having a go for it at Longitude, was there some kind of that experimental spirit at Longitude that informed your skin contact journey or inspired you in some capacity?
What was it about Lammashoek that inspired you guys?
So the question is, was it?
The daughter there is part of the story as well.
So, I mean, long story short, I mean, it's about the people that are working there, and it happened to be us at that time. So we just did what we did, and we had fun. And
but obviously, Mr. Kretzel.
and we were. That's what I was saying. Is my father-in-law back? So I worked for Mr. Sadi next door for 5 years in the vintages, and 100 meters away was the desk of my now wife, who was there, and that's how we met. And then I started Tessalong back then, but now my father-in-law, who lives on the farm where we live now, Paul Kretzel, I mean, I'm forever indebted to him in terms of him allowing me to be creative. He literally, he said, "Do you want to come and work here?" I said, "No," because I was making that. I said, "I'm dating your daughter. I want to make my own wine, and your vineyards, I want to farm organically." So he says, "Well, let's change it." So, I mean, it's easy said than done. It was 70 hectares under vineyard. So it was like, but I was 25, so I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." So we did it, but unfortunately we had, it's not my money, but but things could have really gone badly. And I said to Paul, I need help. Jürgen he just got back from Russia, and he came and enjoyed. He came and helped us, so it was good. And we got it right in the first vintage, second vintage, and third vintage. I really pushed the boundaries out, and I would say that we got it more 50-50. So we got some right, some wrong, but that didn't deter us and Paul, from that. So we moved on, and then I think when we left, it was back to where it was, and I think that was the spirit, and that's what I loved about the Swartland I still do, is that you have that enabling, and I think that everybody's in a good place now.
We've got a question from live stream from Nolene. Is vine age a factor with skin contact wines?
In what way? She can't answer. Yeah, so it's.
Do you consider vine age? Or is it just what?
Yeah, I'll answer that first. I mean, I think obviously it's a very good question because vineyard age definitely plays a role in the more difficult vintages. That's what my understanding of it is. In these very hot stress vintages, like starting in 2016, 17, 17 was fine, but 18, 19 were really under pressure. The old vineyards can adapt. Your younger vineyards are going to use a good Afrikaans word, cuck off. So, that is, and the older vines can withstand that because they've got the experience. So, yes, vineyard age is good for those bad years, but in the good years, I think.
But that'll be true for all wine, not necessarily a skin contact wine.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
No, well, skin contact is all wine.
No, but I'm saying, do you find that older vines?
Older vines adapt to change better than younger ones.
Yeah, but not necessarily having skin contact doesn't. It's not a factor.
No, I don't think so. No, because I first look at it as wine and what is going to make what can that vineyard do best, and it's not that.
Yeah, you use the same or?
Yeah, I agree with that. It's like vines are the opposite of humans, Old people, they struggle to adapt. Younger people normally adapt better. But I would say in those tougher years. But then again, also, when it comes to the skin contact wines, it's also what you're looking for in the wine, in the grape. Is it more about the texture? Is it more about the tannin? Is it more about the fruit as well? So whereas the younger vineyards can give you a bit more of that primary fruit profile. Mm-hmm. So whereas the older ones can give you a bit better texture, better tannin structure. So definitely was great on that. So they've been there for a longer time. They've been more established. They've been through it. So yeah.
Okay, cool. And yes, I've got a question.
Just one question. Will Design market their wine as a skin contact wine, or how does she apply this to the?
Yeah, it's not on the label, and she doesn't even market it as a Sauvignon Blanc. She just calls it the Saint-Lacre of White. It won Sauvignon Blanc of the Year a couple of years ago in Platters, which was a big tick for this style of wine, and I think it brought attention on that technique from quarters in the wine community, we'll call it, that maybe weren't overly familiar with the technique. And she's since made a Semillon with 100% skin contact, and she certainly does communicate that on the label and in her presentation. But she doesn't shy away from it, but she certainly doesn't put it front and center. It's almost like it doesn't define her wine, like you don't see, barrel-aged Cabernet on a label. It's actually just her way of expressing this vineyard.
Does it say anything on skin contact on the back label?
No. But on the website or on the tech sheet, it does absolutely. Look, same with Pinot Gris, but it's pretty obvious once you pour it that something's happened. But with the Tin Soldier, he certainly lets people know that's a skin contact portion, even if it is less than 50%. Just interested in the room, on the Trizan wine. Do you feel that is a skin contact wine, or would you, if you tasted that wine without, as you said, someone, look, this is a nice Sauvignon Blanc, would you feel that there's a skin contact component to it, or something that isn't quite conventional or traditional?
More depth.
More depth, yeah. And that's a good thing, I'm assuming? Yeah.
For me, there's a perceived body that gives almost this perception of sweetness almost.
Yeah.
And just because of the slightly more texture.
Like a richness and textural, and gives it more sweet, like a fruitier character? Yeah, very cool.
For myself, it feels more creamy.
Yes, it's that texture.
Driven, but it's not.
Yeah.
And like knowing that what I know about it, I know it's not that, but if I taste it fine, I'd say it's more mellow than skin.
Yeah, right, okay. And almost maybe a bit of batonage perhaps, or something along those lines, yeah. And she certainly uses batonage in her white wines quite a lot. But obviously you're pressing these wines after fermentation. Do you have any sort of lees in élevage, or is it
Definitely.
yeah? And do you batonage, or what's your regime with it?
No, go on holiday.
Yeah.
I press it, I leave it on the lees as long as I feel it adds, if it's got much higher, if it's got a big acidity, I leave it slightly long on the lees. I like to try to because I think it helps balance that texture. 6-7 months and then I rack it off.
Okay.
But I don't batonage, no.
Okay. Yeah. And so?
No, too lazy to batonage. No, I don't know. I don't believe. I don't,
Too busy surfing
I don't
winter.
believe in batonage in a warm climate. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah.
No, fair enough. What skin contact wines, local or international, do you drink? Do you buy? Or do you try and find and taste when you're overseas?
I drink a lot of Gamay from Beaujolais. That's
Yes.
got skin contact.
Yeah.
No, look, I buy a lot of, well, try not to get the guys. No, we look, obviously there's the South African selection, but I love the Northern Italian stuff.
Okay.
You know, like I've mentioned, I'm trying to, it's difficult to get access obviously here, so obviously when you travel,
Yeah.
it's a lot easier. But I think there's good examples now coming out of Georgia where the guys are, you know, I really love what Pheasant's Tears have become. The wines are much more focused now, and they got there's the combination of the Equivri that they use that gives you this kind of waxiness, which I like. But it's also, it's almost like how wood can dominate a wine, and it's become accepted in Georgia. The Equivri, the clay pots,
Yes.
also give you that flavour.
Yeah. Brings its own character.
And that's I like that. That's why I've never worked with the stuff here. I just thought that's the Georgian way, and it's the flavour that's for their wine. So I leave it there. But yeah, the Slovenian stuff is also very good. I mean, Princic, I love.
Yeah.
There's a guy, Damien Podversic, who worked for Princic, but he's now doing his own stuff, which is amazing. Yeah.
Are they using indigenous varieties or mostly? Or
Yes, but now I can't remember those.
No, yeah,
There's
yeah,
Ribolla,
yeah.
but it will
But they're not
be-
using Chardonnay or.
Well, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's indigenous stuff. Ribolla is pretty
Cool.
much the dominant one.
And Jürgen, what
Yeah,
wines do you drink?
Actually, coming back to the varietals, in Italy there's a few people that use Marsan, and then Turgo. Those kind of varietals is quite, for me, it's quite cool. I mean, I worked. Craig also,
Austrians, I forgot that. Yeah.
Craig also worked with Tom Lever. We both worked there back. I think Alexandri, it was always a very interesting, always a good reference for me. You know, also how to see how they work with the Muscat Petitgrain. And also because in the Roussillon it was a bit more similar climate, warmer climate as well. So once again, I think I took something from there. Italian wines, like I said, the Di Navolo, La Stoppa, yeah, those kind of varietals. And then, yeah, I've been drinking John's wines, importing a few. So it's, you know, to see how they also work with it differently, and also with the extraction and stuff. And then, yeah, we've got some Austrian friends, guys, and
I mean, Klaus Preisinger, he's doing good stuff. Matthias Varnum.
And local guys, do you drink locally or do you?
Yeah, for sure.
What are you
Of course.
drinking?
Well, in terms of skin contact,
Brannico.
well, obviously there's Mother Rock. There's these what we've tasted tonight. I mean, there's not much else though, really. To be
Yeah.
honest. There's Mindshine. They're trying to get more and more.
And also
Yeah.
interesting to see what Plain Amoskel do,
Yeah,
the guys from Spice Route.
Yeah.
Yes.
Doing
Yeah,
the
very
breweries and
nice.
stuff. no?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think it's also, yeah, South Africa is, yeah, more and more people starting to do it, and yeah, I think it's interesting and amazing, and it's, yeah.
Cool.
Actually, I've got a question for you.
For me, we've got a question at the back,
Okay, sorry.
and then we'll get to your question.
Okay.
Just local content in a category that's becoming more prominent and more complicated. Do you find the term orange a bit more challenging as opposed to skin contact? Because the knowledge just really isn't there. And I mean, I look at the Craven, Pinot Gris, and Jürgen's Pink Massage, and this is darker than that. Like, the confusion that I see from consumers is very much prominent with regards to orange, but you explain skin contact and it's fully locked in immediately.
Yes.
Like, do you find the term orange limiting for sales are local for the local market?
I can probably answer that first. There's a reason why we call it the Skin Contact Workshop, not the Orange Workshop, for that exact reason. Because I'd rather describe the technique rather than the perceived outcome, because not all the wines are orange. I mean, for me, practically they're interchangeable. But in terms of describing, I would call the Craven Pinot Gris an orange wine, even though it's clearly not orange. Just like I would call a Chardonnay a white wine, it's clearly not white. It's yellow gold. It's just a shortcut. It's a placeholder essentially. So we wanted to talk about skin contact, the positives, the negatives today, and that's why we call it skin contact. But I'm not sure if you've got any other.
It's exactly. Look, if I say to you, what is an orange? Would you like an orange wine? You'll know exactly what I'm about to pour you. It'll be a white wine that's, well, at least I might think that. But I mean, that's why we also created the category called it skin macerated white wines, because the orange wine. I mean, there are people out there that literally think it's made from oranges. Which is exactly. So we just thought, I'm quite literal, so I probably would have been one of those guys. So, but that's exactly why we called it skin macerated white wine, and I think why David called it exactly. I don't want to repeat you, but skin contact session wines. So does that answer your question?
I mean, well,
because
more is at its core, do you find the term orange limiting for local understanding of what it is?
I find it useful and limiting at the same time. Useful in some respects in the fact that it's sort of halfway between white and red, and so it sort of brings in a mental picture for people in terms of what to expect in the glass. Not everyone who drinks wine knows the ins and outs and the intricacies of production. So if you're saying skin maceration, they don't know what macerated means. I mean, macerated in chef terms means cutting up something very finely. So it's a communicative device to use.
It's a nickname.
Yeah.
Orange wines have become a nickname. So I have many nicknames. I might not like them, but if someone calls it, I know what I'm saying. You can't say I don't want that nickname. You've got it.
But that's why we call you this.
And that's why it's called orange wine. It's exactly the same. It's exactly that same thing.
Yeah.
It's trying to define a nickname.
Jürgen, you probably make the broadest range of wines using different elements of skin contact amongst the three of us. How do you use the term? What do you say? This is my orange wine, and you pick mustache. Do you say this is skin contact wine? And what's your nomenclature about, or do you just sort of?
I just tell them
go with the flow.
Just drink the fucking wine. No. I think it's internationally wise. It's almost like the term orange wine is more used, whereas I think locally, obviously, because we brought in the whole skin macerated thing. They will use the term skin macerated more commonly. So I think, yes, it depends. If I'm in London and we pour the wines, you'll tell them it's orange wine. If I'm here, on the label we actually have skin contact because of, when I started it was all about what, the local knowledge and stuff. So I think, basically I explain to the people how I make it on the skins and stuff, and then at the end of the day, they make up their own perception, whether they want to categorize it as an orange wine, as an amber wine, as a skin contact wine. But I would say that for me, whenever I move abroad, it's almost like the more common term there is more orange wines. Whereas maybe in South Africa, because also we started the classification or the class as skin contact wine this side, So, but then again, there's like amber, then you look at some skin contact wines and they're like so light, so is it the amber color or not? So it can become very technical as well. So,
if they're from Brooklyn, it's an orange wine. If they're from Joburg, this is my wine.
Obviously skin contact by itself includes all red wines as well. So it's a difficult one to qualify. But orange is the convenient term, so the catch-all term for everything in between, I guess. This leads us to pretty much the end of the workshop, unless people have got more questions. Oh, you got a question? That's right. Yeah, you got a question for me.
No.
Thank you. I almost got away with it.
Sorry, somebody else. Do you have a question? Oh, no. So David, So when I started off working with Ex Anima back in the day, I remember basically from 2014, the first 3-4 years,
Yes.
making the skin contact wines was kind of tricky, and in the local market, you know, for people it was something new.
Making it was tricky, or selling it was tricky?
Selling it was tricky,
Okay.
and then you know, trying to explain to people and stuff. And in the first few years, I would do tastings, and people was like, "This is very interesting," you know, but. Interesting.
No, the dreaded word, interesting. This is interesting. It's like, oh, shit.
And now over the last, let's say 5 years or 6 years, you know, you go to local trade shows, people taste the wines. Some of the times they come up to you and the first wine they want to taste are those wines. And I mean, obviously, you guys were a big part of why
it's a very recognizable label. That helps as well.
Yeah, but I'm not just talking about my wine.
Yeah.
You know, so obviously you guys also played a big part in making these style of wines sell, and you know, also for people to understand the wines. How do you see the market? Do you still see the people locally, you know, evolve when it comes to these skin contact wines?
Yeah, absolutely.
And has it reached its ceiling yet, or you know, do you think it's just what's your feeling on it?
The rapid pace of change in the domestic market over the last 10 years, and I can only speak for the last 10 years, that's as long as I've been here, has been so consistent and persistent that I can only imagine it continuing. It might not be as drastic, the movements of styles, but I think, I mean, you're making better wine now than you were in 2014, there's no doubt. So part of it is you're making better wine. Part of it is people being more aware that you're making wine. You know, we did our part, you do certainly. I mean, we can't sell anything that's not made and it's not good. I mean, we can only sell good wine. I mean,
that's actually why I asked the question.
Yeah, of course. But no, it's been a fascinating ride. I mean, when I first arrived, before I started Ex Animo, I was waiting for Home Affairs to do paperwork, and so I had a bit of time on my hands. So I was the vice chairman of the Sommeliers Association in 2013, and I put on a Sommeliers Association orange wine tasting at, where was it? Salt Cellar, where Duncan Savage now is. Tim Martin was occupying that space at the time. And I thought we got every single producer represented in the tasting, and we had 16 wines at that time, and that was in 2013. And we had doubles and stuff. I think we had, you know, a couple of wines from you, or maybe a couple of vintages from you perhaps, or no, we didn't invite any producers. It was a sommelier tasting, and I presented it as a, you know, this is happening, guys. You know, it's on the cusp. You know, be aware of it. And you know, a lot of the top sommeliers came along, and it was a really interesting tasting. It was a very, it was sort of almost like a round table discussion. And then the level of knowledge then was very, very low. But you know, 6 months later, 12 months later, you know, once people get it in their minds and start asking questions, start drinking the wines, start pouring it with different types of food, they soon discover that there is it's almost like another door open to them in terms of being able to use wine in different formats and talking about wine differently. I mean, you talk about Chenin in a different way when you're talking about these three wines than when you're talking about your more conventional direct press wines. You talk about Pinot Gris very, very differently when you're talking about the Craven Pinot Gris than you work when you're talking about quote unquote normal Pinot Gris. And I think that's only, for people who love wine like myself, that can only be a good thing. Exploring different avenues and different perspectives, and surrounding a subject from different sides, and really trying to get as much understanding as, you know, as arrogant as that is, about what you're drinking. I mean, that's the passion and the pursuit is to you know, just the next glass has to be a better one. Yeah, that's it. What food do you eat with these wines? Well, no, because the reason why I bought Biltong is I eat Frankfurt is next door and it's delicious. Look, but I mean, Tannen loves protein. So
when I come to Cape Town, I eat Asian food somewhere. But I do like something with a bit of oiliness, a bit of fat, but also a little bit of spice. But still, for me, the hands down the best thing I've ever had with that wine, the Skin. It was the Skin 2009. It was in Austria on one of those boats. The guy just flipped aubergines with some paprika on it. and he was like some superstar chef. I was like, I could have done that, but
you didn't, did you?
but it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. Yeah. But because of the aubergine obviously has, and yeah, so it was.
And you're going to do any sort of
Well,
Just raw
for me,
cinnamon
kind of
chops?
like mild curries.
okay,
Yeah, we had a birthday. It was actually earlier this year.
like Cape curries or
Yeah.
yeah.
And actually, it was Jasper Wickens' birthday, and everybody went over there, and they all took. Most people just took orange wines, and we got some curries, but quite mild, and it worked so well. And yeah, also Asian food as well. But yeah, for me, the curries was quite a thing. It worked really well, and even sometimes with the Sienna skin contact, because there's a bit of a sweet fruit sensation, and when you do like pork belly with that, it goes really well. So because you still have that little bit of tannin and the sweetness as well. So I think that's also a very good pairing.
I had a food and wine epiphany or moment with Alimentus actually on the west coast with Bottoms. And Alimentus is unbelievable. Unbelievable. It made the Bottoms like edible. and the Alimentus changed in all kinds of ways. The salt, absolutely, and the oil in the fish. It was just a textural explosion. So if you like Bottoms, get on board with Skin Contact.
Yeah,
Stay local.
Probably made the wine slightly sweet as well, with all that salty.
Look, yeah, it both the beauty about when wine and food work together is they both make each other better as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Or express differently. Open up doors that you won't have access to. So, which is great. Is there any questions, guys? I mean, we don't often get these guys in the same room when they're when there's not 20 or 30 people hassling them. So if you've got any questions, otherwise, yes.
And for all of you, where do you see this going? Do you see it becoming a serious category, like that? We'll have skin contact, or like how I would like to think of it is that I hope it opens up kind of the way we talk about wine. That rather we do. It doesn't really matter how it's made, but it's the style that it's made and the outcome really. And it worries me a little bit that I'm looking at 6 different wines, and and they're all different colours. You must have a hell of a job trying to sell them. I wonder how.
You're worried, are you?
No, it's not worried, but it's just like, where do you think it's going? Because I love the skin contact. You guys know how I feel about skin contact. But how do we go forward? What do you see? Where do you see?
What's the next steps to Skin Contact? Do you think?
It's quite. I think we're already past the point of trying to open the door to something. I think it's already there. But now it's about people. I mean, you just have to travel overseas, and you've seen that. It's everywhere. It just needs people to make good wine using this style. That's it. It needs as many people making wine to show the diversity of each individual soil, and then you will see the variance of what works best where and how. And then you have basically data collection. Yeah. Otherwise, it's no use just having the 6 same people making the 6 same skin macerated white wines, and then we all saying, oh, but they are all different, and it doesn't mask terroir. But you need everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people doing it, so that you get to see exactly what I just said.
Yeah.
Just to add on there with Craig, for sure, we need more data. But I think then also, once you're committed in it for the long run, then stay committed. I was in the States in June this year. I went to New York, and it's insane how many orange wines there were if you would walk into a wine shop. But it was just people would stuck a funky label onto a bottle, put a very cloudy wine in the bottle, and sell it for super cheap. But that cheapens the style of the wine as well. So I think us that's serious about this wine and making it in this style, we need to continue, and then hopefully more and more people will add on, and we will have a bigger reference at the end of the day. But definitely, there's definitely, and I think if you even go back into history, and I don't know how many decades ago back when they started making this, and so there's definitely a place for it. But I think reference-wise, we just need a bit more, and we just need to stick to what we do, and not to. I think the one big thing is also, not to cheapen the style, because a lot of times, that happens also in the market. when it comes to the supply and demand. So yeah.
That's actually where I disagree. I think it needs the big guys to start pushing this into the supermarkets. In terms, it depends what you want. You got to, like, we all talk past each other now, yeah. But if you want this categories to grow, style, it needs the massive guys to make it for a supermarket. I get happy when I see that. I used to think it wasn't good, but I think it's good because it needs people to. It's about the wine at the end of the day. Get people drinking and understanding different styles.
Yeah, I mean, I just see it as a tool winemakers can use. These guys have helped open the door in South Africa for understanding, for treating parcels of grapes differently than they might have done in the past to get a better outcome. That's it. Whether they're like extreme 100%, dark orange, cloudy business, or something like the Saboteur White from Luddite, who uses a portion of skin contact in this as well. But again, that's not part of the marketing. They just think that it's a better wine with that component of skin contact in the wine. It's not. They don't lead it. They don't lead their communication about that wine with skin contact. It's just a better wine with skin contact than it is, in their opinion, than it is without it. 95, 98% of the people who drink that wine have no idea that it has skin contact in it. I mean, so why do they need to know?
Exactly.
So yeah, I hope it becomes less necessary to do things like this. Essentially, I hope it becomes more normalised and people will use it because I think it makes better wine in some, like oak can be used well and make better wine, not in every single case. So skin contact can, as with white wine as well. Yeah. Any more questions? No, we're good. Well, thank you very much for coming. Thank you to our two guests. Thank you for their generous offerings of wine. They were delicious. You've got a new release coming up later in the year. You've got 2023s. 24s, yeah. Getting in early. So, yeah, that's going to be interesting. First wine off your new farm.
Yeah, it's from Brandon's Cliff, the Grenache Blanc. I'm just finishing the label actually about an hour before I left to come here, so it's quite fun. A new label, but yeah, it's a Grenache Blanc from the farm. No skin contact on that.
Then don't talk about it.
That's it.
We'll wait until the release.
Yeah.
But thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate it. Please help me by thanking Jürgen Harrison. Stick around, guys. There's more wine in the bottles if you want to stick around. We can't be here forever because the security will lock the gates on us. But if you want to ask more questions off camera, please do. And thanks very much for coming. I hope you had a good time. Cheers. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Purpose.
Just put the chairs back.
Thank you.
Yeah, cheers, man. Thank you. Sure. Thanks, man. Thanks. That was good. That was good. That was very good. Yes, of course.
Kijk, David.
Bottle.